should I fear the light? Why should I fear anymore? With Jehovah by my side, I will not run and hide. My God is with me, this I know.
Thank you. Thank you, meeting.
Bye. See you soon.
Brother Harold Douglas will now give the discourse.
First, we'd like to reflect a little bit on Rupert, his family life history. And so, in the middle of your program, you'll see a section entitled A Little Bit About Rupert C. Murdock. We're going to read from that. Rupert Constantine Murdock was born on July 23rd, 1937, to Ralph and Thelma Murdock in St. Mary, Jamaica, and spent his childhood living in Airy Hill with his sisters Patricia, preceded in death, and Annette. Known as Percy in his younger years, Rupert was later affectionately referred to as Daddy Rupert by his grandchildren and many spiritually adopted children. His mother studied the Bible, dedicated herself to Jehovah, and taught her children about Jehovah as well. Rupert followed her fine example, made his dedication to Jehovah, and on December 5th, 1954, got baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. After leaving primary school, he moved to Kingston, where he attended Gainstead High School. He later secured a job at the Kingston Wharf, and then secured his next job and final tenure at Texaco Caribbean Corporation, where he started as an accountant and conscientiously applied himself until retiring as the manager of human resources. On January 6, 1962, he married Joy Willis, and they spent 61 years serving Jehovah shoulder to shoulder. Upon retirement, Rupert joined his beloved wife, preaching and teaching others about his God Jehovah as a regular pioneer. Their union produced his three dearly loved children, Suzette, Susie, David, and Peter John, PJ. We're going to jump over to the last paragraph in this section. Rupert fell asleep in death on Monday, April 3rd, 2023. He is survived by his beloved wife Joy, the daughter Susie, and her husband Garth, their children Timothy, Simon, predeceased in death, and Jonathan, son David, and his wife Michele, their children Matthew and Sydney, son Peter John and his wife Marie, their children Akira, Zofia, and Peter John. Rupert is also survived by his brother Clive Murdock, his sisters Annette Case and Beth Saxton, along with several nephews, nieces, many other relatives, and a host of spiritually adopted children who still call him Daddy Rupert, as well as numerous friends. We will all miss him dearly. I also have some excerpts from many expressions of love, comfort, and encouragement that the family has received from many friends, and so we just picked a few samplings of their views of their impressions, memories of Rupert. We wanted to share that with you. Now, these are coming from members of his spiritual family first, and so here's one quote. Rupert has eagerly rendered assistance to Jehovah's organization over the years. His support was particularly noted in connection with the branch facility in Old Harbor. He traveled there every Saturday and often during the week for some 4 years. His help with hundreds of immigration issues related to visas, passports, and work permits was invaluable. For some 10 years, Rupert and Joy regularly pioneered together. Both Rupert and Joy have endeavored to have plenty to do in the work of the Lord. Here's another one. Brother Murdock provided me with much training and counseling. We will never forget his loving support while we were on the Marley Mount project. Another, he was very kind to us and took a real personal interest in us. Another, to me, he was approachable and would take time to listen to what you had to say and would then give sound and practical advice. These next two are from family members. It says, he was an amazing human being. I feel very blessed to have known him for over 35 years. And this one from his brother. Whenever we were together, there was always laughter and a good time. And this from a co-worker now. It was her expressions that conveyed the sentiments of the co-workers on his job. Mr. Murdock was loved and respected by all who knew him. He possessed a strong and calming personality, always smiling and always giving a joke to cheer someone up. He was a man of humble character. Mr. Murdock was not only our boss, but he was a friend, a mentor, and someone who provided career advice and counseling when needed. If I tried to sum up Rupert, it would be R for reliable, U for understanding, P for peaceful, E for energetic, R for realistic, and T for trustworthy. And finally, I'd like to add my bit. I can attest to all those sentiments that we just shared as to Rupert's impeccable character. I too benefited from Rupert's love and attention. As a young man, Rupert, he was the one who helped me to gain a foothold on the truth. He studied with me, and over the years, he was my mentor. I learned from his wealth of experience, and a great privilege was to have served with him as an elder in the Golden Spring congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses. I always loved Rupert, and of course, we all will miss him dearly. To lose someone, a dear friend, father, brother, grandfather, to lose someone like that, like a Rupert, is a gut-wrenching ordeal. It is as if someone just ripped a piece of your heart out. And I know that's how many of us are feeling right now. We never get used to losing our loved ones in death. And the reason for that is because death is unnatural. The Bible in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 11 tells us that the way we were created, the way we were made, was never to experience death. It was not Jehovah's intention for death to be a part of the human experience. In fact, in that scripture, it tells us that God put time indefinite into our hearts. So we naturally have a yearning to live on and on and on. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 15 and verse 26, death is called an enemy. So, when we feel grief, sorrow, because of losing a dear friend, a husband, a father, a grandfather, it is a natural part of the human psyche, the human emotion. The Bible tells us of some very strong men who, when they lost their loved ones, they experienced tremendous grief over the loss. So, if you feel like crying, it's okay to cry. It's a human emotion. Look in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, chapter 23, there's an example of Abraham. His beloved wife died. And in chapter 23, verse 2, the account says, so Sarah, his wife, died in Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham began to mourn and to weep over Sarah. And you may well remember when Jesus' friend Lazarus died, and Jesus was there with the family and friends, and they were all grieving over the loss of Lazarus. The Bible says that Jesus gave way to tears. And so we can understand then why we feel this unmeasurable feeling of sadness. We're so overwhelmed with grief because it is a part of the human emotion. Now, Jesus understood human emotions. And so when he was there with Martha and Mary, having lost their brother Lazarus, the Bible helps us to understand that he gave them comfort and encouragement. And he did so in imitation of his father Jehovah. At 2 Corinthians 1 and verse 3, here's what we're told about Jehovah's feelings when we suffer loss like this. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 3 tells us, praised be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of tender mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our trials, so that we may be able to comfort others in any sort of trial with the comfort that we receive from God. Yes, Jehovah is a God who understands our human emotions. He understands our pain, our suffering, and he gives us comfort. How does Jehovah give us comfort at a time like this? One way that he comforts us is by helping us to understand clearly why we as humans die. And he gives us a hope for the future, that while not replacing the life of the one we love, it gives us this hope to look forward to. And we're going to be talking about that in our discourse today. We're going to be talking about why the human experience leads to death. We're going to talk about what God intends to do about that in the very near future. And we're going to gain some measure of comfort from the hope that the Bible holds out to all of us. So let's talk about why it is that we as humans grow old and die. To understand, we have to go back in time to the events recorded in the book of Genesis. Now, at Genesis chapter 2, we're going to look at verses 15 through 17. And this is right after Jehovah created Adam and placed him in the Garden of Eden. Having done that, here's what instructions Jehovah gave to Adam and Eve. Jehovah God took the man and settled him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and to take care of it. Jehovah God also gave this command to the man: from every tree of the garden you may eat to satisfaction, but as for the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, you must not eat from it, for in the day you eat from it, you will certainly die. So clearly, from these verses, Jehovah had a purpose for man. That's why he put man on the earth. He was a caretaker of the earth. He was there to cultivate it and to take care of it. And he had all the provisions to sustain life. He says, from every tree of the garden you may eat to satisfaction. However, there was a prohibition. And there was no doubt in Adam's mind as to what he needed to do or avoid doing in order to continue living. Jehovah said, from this particular tree you must not eat, for in the day you eat from it, you will certainly die. And the Bible tells us that God is a God of justice. So he exercises justice in everything that he does. And if, as a judge, he made a ruling that said, if you do this, this is the consequence, then it was up to the humans now to respect that command and avoid any act of disloyalty or disobedience which could end up in his death. But if you think about it, conversely, if you flip it around, it would therefore mean that if Adam and Eve never ate from that tree, they would live tomorrow and the next day and the next year and the next 100 years and the next 1,000 years, and they would just continue living for eternity. They would never have to die. The only condition that Jehovah gave, which could result in death, is if they disobeyed and ate from that tree. So what happened after that? Well, the events recounted in the book of Genesis chapter 3 outline for us exactly what happened. We read there, beginning in verse 1, now the serpent was the most cautious of all the wild animals of the field that Jehovah God had made. So it said to the woman, and notice the cunning with which Satan enticed Eve to disobey God. It said to the woman, did God really say that you must not eat from every tree of the garden? At this the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but God has said about the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, you must not eat from it, no, you must not touch it, otherwise you will die. Did she understand God's command? Yes, she did. At this, the serpent said to the woman, Notice the deception now. You certainly will not die. Why? For God knows that in the very day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, you will be like God, knowing good and bad. Consequently, in other words, as a result of that reasoning, the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was something desirable to the eyes. Now, I don't know if you recall what she told what she told the serpent before. I'll just go back and remind you. When Satan asked her, did God really say that you must not eat from the tree? She said, part of what she said, you must not eat from it, no, you must not touch it. That's the extent to which she understood that she had to remain away from that tree. You must not even touch it. And so, because of Satan's deception, she now saw the tree as something pleasing to look at. In her mind, it was no longer forbidden. So she began taking of its fruit and eating it. Afterward, she also gave some to her husband while he was with her, and he began eating it. So this action on their part, it was a case of blatant disloyalty and disobedience to their creator, Jehovah, who they knew well. And remember, being a God of justice, he already told them the consequences of this action. And those consequences were, you will positively die. Being a just God, he could not go back on his word. And so what happened to Adam and Eve? As the passage of time rolled along, they got older. They entered into old age, and eventually they both died. But how are we involved in that? Well, look in your Bibles to Romans chapter 5 and verse 12. And here's the answer. There the Bible tells us this. That is why, just as through one man sin entered into the world, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because they had all sinned. So every one of us are born with imperfection built into our system, or genes that we inherited from our parents, who inherited from their parents, all the way back going to Adam and Eve. Their genes were defective. And so the only outcome to human life is eventual old age and death, if we don't die from some tragedy before. So Adam could only pass on to his children what he himself was, an imperfect sinner subject to death. So it's like, if you can imagine, if any of you ladies in the audience, sisters, are bakers, and you have a favorite cake pan or pudding pan, whichever, and one day it fell from your hand, and when it fell, a dent resulted in the side of the pan. But it's your favorite cake pan, so you don't want to throw it away. You continue baking in that cake pan. Well, every cake that you bake from that point on, how is it going to come out? It's going to come out with that impression of the dent in the side of it. Isn't that true? And so that is what happened with Adam and Eve and his children. That dent, that imperfection that he got, is passed on to every single human that has lived on earth. But with that said, there is good news. There is good news because Jehovah God made arrangements to rescue mankind out of this seemingly hopeless state that none of us can get out of. We're like imprisoned. We're trapped. That hope that we're going to talk about today is very soon to be realized. Let's explain. You remember we read in Genesis 2 what God's purpose was for Adam and Eve. You remember Jehovah told them that they were to cultivate the earth, take care of it. In another verse, he told them to be fruitful and fill the earth and have it in their subjection. So, Jehovah wants us to understand that original purpose for which he made man is a purpose that will never fail. And you know, sometimes when I'm studying the Bible with people, I ask them, as you think about God in your mind, when you picture God, if someone were to ask you, do you think God can ever fail in anything that he does? And I've never had somebody yet tell me yes. They say, no, God never fails. So if his original purpose when he created Adam and Eve was for them to live forever on earth, the question is, has he failed? Or will his purpose be realized? Well, the Bible helps us to understand that. Jehovah very kindly used an illustration to make the point clear. And he did so through the prophet Isaiah. In the book of Isaiah, chapter 55, he uses this illustration of the natural precipitation system that is present. We all know about rainfall and snow and so on. Notice how he uses that to bring home the point that his purpose will never fail. In Isaiah chapter 55, beginning at verse 10, and as we read the verses, picture in your mind what it's talking about. It says, just as the rain and the snow pour down from heaven and do not return there until they saturate the earth, making it produce and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. So you got that natural cycle of events, right? The rain falls, the ground sprouts, green grass grows, and eventually, if there are fruit trees or wheat, whatever, it gives seed to the sower and bread to the eater. It's a natural cycle of events. He then compares that to his word in verse 11. He said, so my word that goes out of my mouth will prove to be. It will not return to me without results, but it will certainly accomplish whatever is my delight, and it will have, notice this, sure success in what I send it to do. I don't know if any of you have watched the news lately of what's happening in California, but they had a prolonged drought in California, and in the last couple of weeks they've had tremendous rainfall. So they had a piece on, I don't remember the station, ABC, CNN, one of them, but they showed the hillsides of Southern California, and it was the most beautiful sight you can imagine. It was ablaze with color. All the wildflowers were just sprouting everywhere. The natural cycle of events. The rain fell, the seeds that were lying on the ground sprouted. They gave rise to these beautiful plants, and eventually the flowers were just ablaze on the hillsides. Jehovah is telling us that his word is like that rainfall. Once it leaves the heavens and falls to the earth, it's going to accomplish the purpose for which it was sent. And he's telling us that his word, when he gives that word out, it is going to accomplish its purpose for which he sent it. And his word was that Adam and Eve should fill the earth, multiply, have children, and care for the earth for how long? Forever. That was his purpose. And he's telling us that that purpose, once he gives that word, it is sure to be accomplished. We haven't seen it yet. The earth is not a paradise. And therefore we can be sure that that word is future. It will be accomplished in the near future. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, this leaves us to still wonder about the condition of our loved ones. Yes, we're going to talk about that future hope, but in the meantime, many of us worry or wonder. So in the meantime, where is my loved one? Where has he gone? Millions of people around the world have been persuaded to believe that humans possess an immortal soul. That is, an inner being that cannot die. And that at death, that soul leaves the body and travels. Some say to heaven, some say to hell. Some say it travels and enters some other creature like a goat or a dog or whatever the case might be. That's reincarnation. But all of these teachings are based on the idea that man has an immortal soul. The Bible, however, does not support that view. An immortal soul means that this other creature, this other being, cannot die. Notice what the Bible tells us at Ezekiel chapter 18 and verse 4. Speaking about the human soul, which the Bible does talk about, it says, "Look, all the souls, to me they belong." This is God speaking. "As the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son. To me they belong." And then it says, "The soul that is sinning is the one who will die." The soul that sins is the one who will die. Flying in the face of this idea that the soul is immortal. If it can die, it cannot be immortal. And you notice it says, all the souls, to me they belong. The Father, the Son. It's talking about us as humans. We are living souls. In fact, in the creation, when Jehovah gave Adam life, it says he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man came to be a living soul. It didn't tell us that God put a soul in him. The man himself came to be a living soul. So then, what happens to us at death? What has happened to Rupert when he passed away? Well, we're not left in any doubt. The Bible tells us clearly. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, here's what we're helped to appreciate about death. Chapter 9, verse 5, 6, and 10. We're told there, the living know that they will die. And all of us here are very much aware that one day we will die, right? So we know we will die. But the dead know nothing at all, nor do they have any more reward, because all memory of them is forgotten. Also, their love and their hate and their jealousy have already perished, and they no longer have any share in what is done under the sun. And verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, in other words, while you're alive, whatever your hand finds to do with all your might, for there is no work, nor planning, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave where you are going. In other words, the Bible is helping us to understand that at death, we have entered a lifeless state. There is no memory, there is no activity. They can't reach out to you and share any thoughts by dreams or visions. They are just dead, a lifeless body. But the state of death is likened to that of a deep sleep. Now you remember when Lazarus was sick and the sisters sent to call him to see if he could come and cure Lazarus of his illness. Before Jesus left where he was, he said, Lazarus, our friend, has gone to sleep. And the disciples were glad. They said, well, Lord, if he has gone to sleep, it's a good thing. That means he's resting. He's going to recover. And then it says, Jesus told them plainly, no, Lazarus has died. In other words, he likened death to a state of sleep. And the faithful man Job, you've heard about Job. This faithful man who loved Jehovah, and Job's sufferings were of the kind that none of us would have ever wanted to endure even a portion of those sufferings. And Job was so distressed over his condition that he lamented his life. And notice what Job stated at Job chapter 3 as he reflected on the intense pain that he was going through, emotional, physical pain that he was enduring. In Job chapter 3, and beginning at verse 3, this is what he said. Let the day perish on which I was born. Also the night when someone said, a man has been conceived. And we drop down to verse 11 and 13. His musings, he said, why did I not die at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me and breasts to nurse me? For now I would be lying down undisturbed. I would be sleeping and at rest. Job understood the condition of death. He said, if only I had died at birth, right now I would be sleeping and at rest. So really, the Bible helps us to appreciate that death is very similar to sleep. Now, if you've ever gone maybe in the midday to take a nap and you fall asleep and you're in a deep sleep, and someone wakes you maybe after an hour or so pass, and they wake you up and oh my goodness, how long was I sleeping? And you say an hour, and you kind of say, yeah, well, okay, what happened while I was sleeping? You don't know anything in that hour while you were sleeping. And so Death is like that. It's a state of non-existence, no consciousness of any kind. But now, how is it possible for that purpose we spoke about that Jehovah has for the human family to fill the earth and subdue it? How is that possible? And especially when we consider how it applies to our loved ones who have died. How is that a possible hope for them? It is possible by means of the resurrection hope. The Bible speaks about a resurrection. And Jesus performed a resurrection, not just one, but the most outstanding one was that of Lazarus when he was on earth. Because of what Jesus did on our behalf, he has made possible the opportunity for our loved ones to be resurrected to life once again. Let's notice what we're told at Matthew chapter 20 and verse 28. This has to do with the purpose that Jesus came to the earth. He said there, and this is Jesus speaking, just as the Son of Man came, not to be ministered to, but to minister and to give his life as a ransom in exchange for many. Now we all know what a ransom is, right? If a terrorist group may capture their enemy and they demand a ransom, there is a payment that has to be made in order for that captive to be released. It's called a ransom. And you remember we said that the human family is enslaved to sin and death. We're being held captive. So a ransom price was necessary for Jehovah to release the human family to captivity to sin and death. And so by Jesus coming to the earth, offering his life in exchange for what Adam did, we have the hope of gaining that future resurrection. Here's what 1 Corinthians 15, verse 20 to 22, further tell us about this. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 20 through 22. It says, "But now Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep in death. For since death came through a man, resurrection of the dead also comes through a man. For just as in Adam all are dying, so also in the Christ all will be made alive." So here we have it. Just as in Adam all are dying, all that we can look forward to is death. It says, but the Christ, through his sacrifice, all will be made alive. We will have the hope of the resurrection. Now, that word resurrection is from a Greek word, anastasis. And then the Greek word anastasis literally means a raising up, a standing up. It refers to a restoration to life from which one came. A raising up from the dead back to the life we previously enjoyed. That's what that word resurrection means. So it is helping us to appreciate that those who have died and who are qualified will have the prospect of raising up again to live their life the way they were before. And we have no better example than that of Lazarus. You remember when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead? The Bible, when Lazarus came out of the tomb, Jesus instructed them, loose him and let him go. And it wasn't very long after that the family held a feast in Bethany, and many came from all over the surrounding areas to see Lazarus, because word had spread. Everybody wanted to see this man that Jesus had raised from the dead. And where was Lazarus? He was at the dinner feast with his family, enjoying life the way he had before. That's what the resurrection is promising us. And so God has appointed Jesus to be the one to oversee the raising of the dead. Millions of people who have died are going to be resurrected back to life once again. John 5:28 and 29, Jesus assures us of this. Notice what he said there, John 5:28 and 29. Do not be amazed at this, he said, for the hour is coming in which all those in the memorial tombs will hear his voice and come out, those who did good things to a resurrection of life, and those who practiced vile things to a resurrection of judgment. Did you notice it spoke about all those in the memorial tombs? Why did it use the expression memorial tombs? Because a tomb is a tomb. Why then a memorial tomb? You see, because a lot of people who die, they have made a memory in God's mind about themselves. And so they're living in God's memory. Thus, even though they're in the tomb, in God's mind, they're in a memorial tomb. He will remember them, and he will call them out, and they will come back to life once again. The wise man, the faithful man Job, he also believed in the resurrection. In fact, as he reflected on his status in life, the pain and suffering he was enduring, here's what Job said. He said, man born of woman is short-lived and filled with trouble. He comes up like a blossom and then withers away. He flees like a shadow and disappears. And then he said, who can produce someone clean from someone unclean? No one can. Then he said, speaking about a tree, there is hope even for a tree. If it gets cut down, it will sprout again, and its twigs will continue to grow. If its roots grow old in the ground and its stump dies in the soil, at the scent of water it will sprout, and it will produce branches like a new plant. But a man dies and lies powerless. When a human expires, where is he? But notice this. Oh, that in the grave you would conceal me, that you would hide me until your anger passes by, that you would set a time limit for me and remember me. If a man dies, can he live again? I will wait all the days of my compulsory service, that's in the grave, until my relief comes. You will call, you, God, will call, and I will answer you, because you will long for the work of your hands. Yes, Jehovah yearns. He longs for the day when he can restore mankind to the original purpose that he intended for us. So the resurrection hope then is one which embraces two categories of people. Jesus spoke about a little flock, and in the book of Revelation they are spoken of as sharing with Jesus as kings and priests and co-rulers in the kingdom. But he also spoke about other sheep that are not of that group. Those are the ones that will enjoy everlasting life right here on a paradise earth. And you will remember the evildoer that was put to death beside Jesus. When the evildoer said to him, Lord, remember me when you get into your kingdom. And you remember what Jesus answered? He said, truly I tell you today, you will be with me. Where? In paradise, that earthly garden that we're looking forward to. So the resurrection will include millions of persons, not only those who faithfully worship Jehovah, but it also includes those who died without an opportunity to understand and apply the Bible's truth in their lives. The book of Acts chapter 24 and verse 15 reassures us of that. Let's just look at that. Acts 24 and verse 15 says, and this is the apostle Paul speaking. He said, I have hope toward God, which hope these men also look forward to, that there's going to be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. So this grand resurrection is going to apply to millions of people who have died and who God will bring back to life to live here on the earth. So even though this is a very sad occasion, there are benefits for us being here today. First of all, a funeral reminds us of the brevity and uncertainty of life. The Bible in Ecclesiastes 9 tells us that time and unforeseen occurrence befall all men. And we don't know what can happen to any one of us when we leave here this evening. Time and unforeseen occurrence befall all men. And the reality of death, being aware that death could be visited on any one of us at any time, should make us pause and reflect on how are we using our lives. In fact, Moses, in a prayer to God, here's what he said in the book of Psalm, chapter 90. And we're going to look at verse 9, 10, and 12. Moses said in prayer to God, he said, our days ebb away because of your fury, and our years come to an end like a whisper. The span of our life is 70 years, or 80 if one is especially strong. But they are filled with trouble and sorrow. They quickly pass by, and away we fly. Then he says, teach us how to count our days so that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. So as we reflect on how we use our life, we recognize that being here is a chance for us to pause, think about how we're using our lives, and see if we can make changes so that we can be pleasing to Jehovah God. You remember Jesus said we need to store up treasures in heaven. Rupert was a wonderful example of this. He loved his God Jehovah dearly, and he exerted himself in his service. So by our zealous works for Jehovah and our godly conduct, we can share in sanctifying Jehovah's name. Jehovah is extending to each and every one of us this loving invitation to do just that. At the book of Proverbs 27 and verse 11, here's what he tells us. This is an invitation he's giving to us all. He says, be wise, my son, and make my heart rejoice, so that I can make a reply to him that is taunting me. Yes, Satan is taunting Jehovah, saying, none of us will serve Jehovah faithfully. And Jehovah is saying, help me to make a reply to Satan that that is not true. By the way you live your life, I can use you as a good example to make a reply to Jehovah. So as we live through the unfolding events of these last days, may we take to heart the invitation that Jehovah is offering to become his friend, to draw close to him, to learn about him and his son and the arrangements he has made to rescue us from death. And may we use the resurrection hope as an incentive to learn and to do God's will. Those who do and who survive to the end of this wicked system can be certain that we will soon see Rupert again and innumerable other loved ones who have passed away. We can only but imagine what a wonderful, joyous time that will be. In the meantime, may we use this occasion and the days ahead to comfort one another, to comfort the family. Let us keep encouraging one another, reminding one another of our sure hope, and providing emotional support. We prayerfully look to Jehovah to give us the needed strength until he provides permanent relief in the very near future from the stresses and sorrows of life in this system.
We thank you very much, Brother Douglas, for giving the memorial discourse, your words of comfort and encouragement. Uncle Rupert was a stalwart, especially to us younger ones coming up. He was larger than life. And Auntie Joy was right there as a supportive wife beside him. We will truly miss him. There's just, if you look at the second to last page of your program, his message to you. The last line, seek Jehovah now so that I will be able to see you then. Powerful words that should serve to encourage us all. On the back of your program, the family of Rupert C. Murdock would like to express their sincere thanks for the care given by the healthcare team at the University Hospital of the West Indies, Ward 8. We would like to thank everyone for their warm and dear expressions of love, support, and prayers during this difficult time. I just want to add here, as part of the thanks, we want to thank Marlene Caputo and Fabian Liao for the beautiful decor that we have here, and the many others who helped to make this memorial service the success it has been. The Tate family, we thank Shelley and Zofia Murdock, who did a lot. We thank them, and also all the others who assisted. It goes on to say, we greatly appreciate the love you have shown and want you to know that it has truly helped us to cope during our time of loss. No, my program didn't go blank. All right, I get it. May Jehovah continue to bless you all. As we look forward to the paradise, when these sad occasions will cease to exist. We're going to have our closing song now, song 144, keep your eyes on the prize, and then Brother Douglas will end with a closing prayer on our behalf. We had a combined attendance in person, Zoom, and on YouTube of 1,121.
fear the light? Why should I fear anymore? With Jehovah by my side, I will not run and hide. My God is with me, this I know.
Change it. You do anything?
Bye. Bye. See you soon.